and welcome to Enter the Vault. I'm your host, Nancy Giacalone. For those of you that don't know me, I have a long history in the employee benefits industry, starting in the mid 1980s. And in the past few years, I have received some wonderful industry recognition. I received not only the Lifetime Achievement Award from the U Powered Symposium, but was also named the 2023 Broker of the Year by Benefits Pro magazine. So I'm coming to you. I only give you that background so that you know that what I'm speaking about is based in experience, knowledge, and history. So today we are going to start it off with talking a little bit about where it all began. So for me, I entered the benefits industry in 1986 via a very strange route, as most of us end up in the benefits industry. I had previously been a sales rep for an automotive parts company, one of six female sales reps of a sales force of about 200 people across the country. And I was very successful at it. I loved it. It was a great job. However, I met the love of my life, my husband. And after dating for a very short period of time, we decided that we should live in the same town. And he happened to be up in a town called Tacoma, Washington. So I moved there and had to give up my sales job in the process. So back in the day, when you were looking for a new job, you went to an employment agency. Also, back in the day, if you were looking for a job, you were the one that paid the employment agency fee. Sometimes you could get an employer to split it with you. So, anyway, I went through the whole process, went on a number of job interviews, and ended up accepting a position with a firm. At the time, it was called the Dudley Stair Agency. I was an administrative assistant to a New York Life agent, and he handled the benefits for primarily a property and casualty agency. With his life insurance background, that's really where his heart was in life insurance. And so the benefits he would kind of give to me to work on. So again, hopping in the Wayback Machine for you, those of you that were not around at that point in time or have no recollection of things called typewriters, that's what I had to do my benefit proposals and comparisons on. So they weren't quite as antiquated as the old manual ones that you did this on. They did have a little bit of memory feature, but you learned to know your information really well, and you learned to be very accurate and pay attention to details. Because if you made a mistake, guess what happened? You had to start over. So as a result of having to pay that close of attention, I feel that it really benefited me because I got to learn all of the carrier plans, programs very intimately. At the time, we also had really great connections with carrier vendors and reps. We had a one on one connection. We didn't have email. We had couriers. So if we needed to get information to an insurance company, there were insurance couriers that came around to all the agencies, and the insurance companies picked information up and dropped it off. It was actually pretty slick. But that is how we got information there. In the first year that I was working there, we were so innovative and on the edge, we purchased a fax machine. It was a big deal. So, again, but at that time, we got to speak directly to underwriters. We got to speak to people that were making decisions, and we could have face to face discussions and understand the problems that were happening and work with them to create resolutions. Unlike now, where underwriters are treated like the Wizard of Oz and behind a curtain, and we mere mortals are not actually allowed to speak to them. I miss those days. At the time, we did not have, so in Washington State, Blue Cross and Blue Shield are separate. Blue Shield was run by the medical bureaus, which were established by the doctors. So Blue Cross hospitals, Blue Shield physicians. So we had Pierce County Medical, King County Medical, etc. Those were county-based specific plans. So Pierce County Medical at the time was in an old J.C. Penney's building. We could ride the escalator up, go sit down and talk to our reps. We could talk to the underwriters. It was a great time, honestly. Eventually, they all came together. It was practical and it made more sense because then we had coverage for the entire state. So all of the medical associations joined and formed what was then called Regents Blue Shield. So Regions Blue Shield is of Washington. They are in other states as well. So in Washington State, again, as I mentioned, Blue Cross is still separate from Blue Shield. So we have Primera Blue Cross, we have Regions Blue Shield. It's a little bit different than other states. But one of the interesting things that I experienced pretty early in my career is that I started moving into sales. And so I actually had a seat at the Pierce County Medical um, Broker Advisory Committee. I don't remember what it was called back in the day. But I went in and I sat down in a room full of all men, except for me. At the time, I was probably in my mid 20s. They were all probably in their early 40s. At the time, they seemed like they were ancient, like I am now. It's all a matter of perspective. But we got in that room, and I remember distinctly, I'll never forget this. I remember them pitching the idea of a preferred plan, what we now know as a PPO network. So prior to that, they were indemnity plans. So they reimbursed based on charges. But the PPO plans were going to have a network, and they were going to eliminate the need for a member to send in a claim for reimbursement or wait for something to be paid. They were only going to have to pay a $5 copay. It was going to be so amazing. I was 26, 27 years old. I tentatively raised my hand and I said, I'm not sure that that is a good idea, because isn't it going to significantly increase claims because it removes the member from the actual cost of services and the decision-making process? Oh, I was poo-pooed. Shame on you for asking such a horrible question. This is amazing. Everyone's going to love it. All of the men around the table said, are we going to get paid more for selling this? That was the biggest concern back in the day. So things have evolved substantially over the years, but that's where it started for me. So this series, I'm going to give you an outline of the type of information that we're going to cover. So in our next episode, we're going to talk about what are employee benefits, basically a beginner's guide. We're going to define what falls into the category of employee benefits and talk about their purpose, why they started, why are benefits provided through your employer. And then we're going to talk about the different types of benefits: health insurance, dental insurance, vision insurance, disability coverage, retirement plans, paid time off packages, total reward programs. So we're going to get into understanding the components of employee benefits. And then the next episode, we're going to go into a little bit more of a history. So I gave you my little personal example, but we're going to go into the history and how they've evolved from doctors that came together to form a better way for individuals to pay for coverage to where they are now. And then we're going to talk about, in that same episode, we're going to cover some of the key legislation that has impacted what we know as employee benefits today: ERISA, COBRA, the Affordable Care Act, the Consolidated Appropriations Act. These are going to be very in-depth educational episodes. So if you want to understand how employee benefits have evolved and where they started, you're not going to want to miss that episode. The third episode will then be on who are the key players, who all is involved in employee benefits. We, of course, have employers, we have insurance carriers, we have brokers or consultants, we have third-party administrators. Let's not forget about the employees themselves. And then there's all these other vendors that wrap around. What's a PBM, pharmacy benefit manager, and why does it matter? We're going to talk about how they work together or how they don't, and some of the misaligned incentives in our industry. And then we're going to have a really fun episode on decoding the alphabet soup of benefits. We're going to break down the acronyms like HSA, HDHP, FSA, PPO, HMO, EAP, EPO. I could go on and on. Believe me, the list is long. So that's going to be the very first series. We're going to talk about, again, where did it start? And how are we going to learn from where we've been to where we want to go? So from there, we're going to get into actually focused topics: health insurance 101, Understanding retirement plans. I'm going to need to bring on a guest for that one because that's not my forte. Wellness programs. Again, so some of these episodes, I will have guests because I'm not necessarily the expert in these areas, but they're important for everybody to understand. Wellness programs. Do they help or don't they? Are they worth the money or not? We're going to talk about the role of PTO, not only from an employer standpoint, but how have states gotten involved and how do your employee benefits support them, disability programs, et cetera. The emphasis on work-life balance. How does that factor into your PTO programs? Then we'll move on to legislation and compliance, understanding the Affordable Care Act, ERISA and why it matters, navigating COBRA. You know, COBRA was introduced, I believe it was in 1980, and I was fairly well established, 1990, 1995. I mean, I'll have the exact date when we get into that episode. But I can remember sitting in a room full of brokers when we were learning what it meant. And there were many of us that thought it was going to kill the insurance industry. How are we going to survive this? So I think this is such an important topic. And to this day, I get more questions on COBRA than almost any other topic when it comes to legislation. We're going to talk about, again, the CAA, the Consolidated Appropriations Act. How does this impact us? What changes did it make? Or was it simply a reminder of what we were supposed to be doing with ERISA all along? Then once we get past some of the foundational issues, we'll be moving into emerging trends and innovations. The gig economy, what's changing? How did COVID affect us? It made some really big challenges. How do we provide benefits for part-time, freelance, and even gig workers? Or can we? Technology. This is a big topic. Again, as I mentioned, when I first came into the industry, we did not have computers. We did not even have fax machines. We had couriers and typewriters. Obviously, I don't think any of us could live today without our technology. We have benefit administration platforms. We do enrollment online. We engage with employees online. I'm talking to you via a podcast. These things were unheard of. So how do we continue embracing technology in a way that enhances our benefit programs and doesn't take away from them? This one's a little bit of a hot topic, but I am not going to shy away from it because I think we need to talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion in benefits. I know it's a hot topic, but again, it needs to be addressed. We have diverse employee populations, and how are we reaching them where they're at? How are we providing them information that helps them understand how to get the care they need, when they need it, where they need it? So we're going to dive into that. And then the rise of voluntary benefits. Voluntary benefits used to only be thought of as AFLAC or Colonial, but voluntary is quite comprehensive, actually. Many of your mainline carriers now provide voluntary benefits as well. Sometimes they're called worksite benefits. These would be things like voluntary dental or vision at the very basic, voluntary life insurance and disability, accident coverage, critical illness, hospital indemnity. The list goes on. So we're going to dive into that a bit deeper. And once we've laid the foundation, we're going to get into some practical guides and real life scenarios. Let's talk about an explanation of benefits, an EOB, just another acronym we'll throw out there. When's the last time you got one and fully understood what it was saying? And do you take the time to match it up to the bill you got from your provider's office to make sure you're not overpaying? It's really important that your employees and your team members understand medical billing. What does this mean? Does this seem right? What do I do if I question it? Who do I go to? So we're going to get into that. And who can forget an open enrollment survival guide? In our industry, we affectionately refer to it as Q4 because that's when the bulk of our employers renew their employee benefit programs, January 1st, December 1st, sometime in that time period. Yours may happen at a different time, but the reality of this time period is very important to understand. What are the timelines we're working for? What are our communication strategies? How do we set ourselves up for success so that the HR department is not overwhelmed, the consultant isn't overwhelmed, and your team members really understand the changes that have been implemented, how it's going to affect them, and how to make good decisions about the options they have. We're going to talk about life events and benefits. QLEs, qualified life events. I'm going to just continue peppering you with these acronyms because it just gives me more fuel for that particular episode. You got married. Can I add my spouse to my insurance? How long do I have to do it? What type of information do I need in order to substantiate that I actually have had an event? And what about in reverse? I lost coverage or I'm getting a divorce. How am I able to update my benefits, and when can I update them? So we're going to spend a full episode talking about that. We talk about all the good stuff. Let's talk about the bad stuff too. Let's talk about mistakes to avoid in benefit selection. What are some common pitfalls? And how can you make informed choices? So, this doesn't just apply to employers, this applies to you as an individual. If receiving your benefits through your employer, how do you wade through the myriad of choices? How do you make the best choice? Is it simply based on the premium, or is it based on your unique situation and how you'll be impacted ultimately? So, we're going to talk about that and how to avoid buying things you don't need. My philosophy around insurance has always been buy as much as you need, but don't buy too much. So it's a fine line because insurance is nothing more than the transfer of risk. How much risk do I need to transfer, and how much risk am I willing to transfer? So those are questions that we're going to address. How to use employee assistance programs, EAPs. They've been around forever. You've had them probably available to you. You've probably had somebody tell you about it. And immediately after being informed, it flew out your mind because you're like, I don't need that. I'm never going to use it. It's a random 800 number. How are they going to really help me? It's a fantastic benefit. And we are going to talk about all that is there, how you can use it. This is a benefit that does not cost you a thing. And in most cases, it's available to you and anybody that lives in your household. So we're going to talk about employee assistance programs. And then we're going to get into, and as we wrap up the season, we're going to talk about case studies. We're going to have a Q&A with a benefits expert. We're going to have some myth-busting employee benefits misconceptions. Because a lot of times people think, gosh, my employer is just going to keep all of these savings. They're making these changes to the plan because they're more concerned about their bottom line. Let's talk about what that really looks like. We're going to have some interviews with employees. And then finally, we'll wrap up the season with future-proofing your benefit strategies. So if anybody has additional suggestions that you would like to see me cover, or you would like to volunteer to be the expert on one of these topics, I would love to hear from you. I'm very excited for this season. I think it's going to be a lot of fun, really diving into the nitty-gritty of benefits, where we've been, where we're going, and what the future holds. I'm super pleased for any of you that took the time to join me on this initial episode. There's so much more to come, and I can hardly wait to share it with you. See you in 2 weeks.